Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this was an interview at the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society, Buffalo, New York. It is the 24th of August, 2006, approximately 10:15 a.m. Interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Thomas Martin Murphy. I was born March 4th, 1930, Shamokin, Pennsylvania.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Just high school.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was enlisted.
Why did you decide to enlist?
My education wasn't going no place. I took the wrong courses. So at the age of 17, I talked my parents into enlisting.
Okay, so they signed for you.
They signed for me, and that was January 1948.
Okay. Why did you decide to go into the Navy?
A couple of my buddies had enlisted prior to that, and 4 or 5 of us all decided to join. And 3 of us actually went with them. One was old enough. The other 2, myself, were too young, so we got our parents to sign for us. And we thought the Navy was a good.
Now you mentioned that your father was a World War I veteran.
Yes, that's correct. As was my brother, a World War II veteran. We were both combat veterans.
And they
All
both served.
suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Oh.
So,
And they both served in the Army.
my dad was an artilleryman, my brother was an infantryman.
Okay.
Fought through Europe, as my dad was in 4 major campaigns over in World War I. Only over there for 6 months, but we seen nothing come back.
Okay. All right, where did you go for your basic training?
Great Lakes Airlines. Enlisted in Buffalo.
Okay.
How was basic training? How long was that?
Pardon me?
How long was your basic training?
It lasted from probably about 10 weeks because the company I was with, they were exceptional good, and for some reason we won some regimental flags in competition with other companies, and due to that they gave us excuse from what they call mess cooking details for 2 weeks. So I got home 2 weeks before my buddies from the other company.
Ah.
So,
Okay, where did you go after Great Lakes?
I was assigned to a destroyer operating out of New Orleans. Actually, it was a town across the river called Algiers, Louisiana.
Okay, what was the ship that you were on?
USS Borie, Borie, DD 704.
Were you put through some sort of on-the-job training program?
I was given during boot camp, which I think all naval personnel go through, give you aptitude tests to see what you can qualify for, and apparently they decided that I was mechanically inclined, which I was interested in, and I ended up in the engineering division aboard ship, which is, well, I actually ended up in the water room. And there's where the training came in, because I was under the supervision of some first class, second class petty officers and chief, and they trained me pretty well. I ended up as a second class petty officer after 4 years. The ship was Algiers, Louisiana, is across the river from Mississippi. There was 9 destroyers stationed there. It was a small base, but it had pure facilities to accommodate 9 destroyers. And it was known as the AC-Doocy Squadron, 122, Division 122. And what we did while I was there, we took reserves on 2-week training cruises in the Carribean and Gulf of Mexico, and we visited quite a few ports. Probably I visited Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I've been there about 8 times. I'm very, well, not all on this ship, I was on another ship too. But we visited Veracruz, Mexico, some port in Guatemala, Panama, Colón, Panama, Santiago, Cuba, Havana, Cuba, St. Thomas and Virgin Island, Port-au-Prince, Haiti, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Roosevelt Roads is a big naval base down there. And we, what we did, we took the reserves out on the 2-week training cruises, and then we come back in the port, and then the next crew would come aboard. And that's what we did from probably April 1948 till sometime in probably May of 1949. The ship was then transferred to Norfolk, Virginia for overhaul. we went into dry docks in Portsmouth, Virginia, and they about 3 months overhaul, and after we come out of there, we went on an extended cruise down into Guantanamo Bay, where we're breaking in the crew, and we had all new, by that time we had all new personnel aboard, including the captain and the engineering officer. And then we come back to Norfolk, and on September the 6th, 1949, we left for a cruise to the Mediterranean. But on the way over, halfway across the Atlantic, they took 2 ships, the USS Borie and USS Walter DD 699, and they sent us on a Goodwill trip with Northern Europe. And from that trip,
Now, what do you mean by a Goodwill trip?
they just wanted us to visit, show the Navy in various ports in Northern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And we operated out of Plymouth, England, which is a big naval base of the United Kingdom. And from there we visited Liverpool, Londonderry, Northern Ireland, Rothesay, Scotland. And then we traveled back down and went through the English Channel and went up to Stavanger, Norway. Traveled to Narvik, Norway, which is 300 miles above the Arctic Circle, and we became what was known as frozen toes. We were indoctrinated into the frozen toes as a society, probably a Navy thing.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, after we left Narvik, we came down and hit Bremerhaven, Germany, stayed there for a couple of days, and then we were supposed to report back to Plymouth, England, or Portsmouth, England, Plymouth. And on the way there, after we got there, it was a pretty stormy weather then, and we had to make a taxi run to pick some admiral up because the weather was so bad, we couldn't fly, so we had to take him from Plymouth into Le Havre, France. So I got to see Le Havre. Went back to Plymouth for a couple of days, and then we left there and headed for the Mediterranean, where our original squadron was.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped at Lisbon, Portugal, Gibraltar, then into Toulon, France. Stayed there for a couple of days. I think we spent Thanksgiving of 1949 in Toulon. Then we went to visit the Malta, and that's where the captain of our ship was killed in a jeep accident. And our commanding officer decided to change over. His name was Commander Wiley, I believe, and Lieutenant Commander Montgomery took over the ship because he was dead. And from there we went to Piraeus, Greece, and Athens. We left Athens after we spent the Christmas day there, in Piraeus, visited the Acropolis, the ruins.
Mm-hmm.
From there they came back and we went up to Naples, visited Pompeii, and then I took a quick trip off to Rome. And after we left there, we came by, stopped at Syracuse, Sicily. And on the way past Mount Etna, it was Rockton, by the way. It was at night, it was quite a sight. And after we left Syracuse, we headed over to Algiers, North Africa, spent a few days there, and then left and went to Gibraltar, and we were to leave the duty and the squadron to come back to Norfolk. That was January 1950.
You really got around.
The ship was,
Join the Navy and see the world.
we did. We seen something like, I think there were 17,500 nautical miles in 16 countries and many ports of call. I can't remember them all. So then we come back and the ship went back into Portsmouth, the Naval Yard down in Virginia, another overhaul. And I come home and leave. That was in sometime in June of 1950. I was home from my brothers. 2 brothers were supposed to get married. I made my one brother's wedding, but the Korean War had broken out 25th of June. They called me back to the ship and then got ready for a trip to the Far East. So the ship pulled out of Norfolk on September the 6th, 1950, and we headed through the Panama Canal up to San Diego, spent some time there, and spent some time in the port there in Cristobal, I think it is, in the Pacific side of the Colon. I can't remember which one it was. Anyway, we spent some time in San Diego, then we headed over to Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, spent some time there, headed on to Midway, fueled the ship. I was oil king, by the way. That's why I mentioned fueling the ship and took care of all the oil consumption and the water consumption. And after we left Midway, we headed to across the North Pacific to come into Yokosuka, Japan sometime in October, probably October the 8th, in that general area. Fueled ship, took on ammunition supplies, was assigned to the 7th Fleet of the under the United Nations Command, fighting for the communist North Koreans. So we headed for Japan, and we were assigned to bombardment duties, mine sweeping, landing troops from, let's see, from October the 8th until Christmas Day, Christmas night. The engines never stopped turning. We were on watch, four on and four off. Dawn general quarters, evening general quarters, because they were afraid we might be under air attack.
Mm-hmm.
So we were bombarded most of all these cities along the eastern coast, shelling, blowing up railroad bridges, lending ground support. We landed the entire 7th Division at Wonsan Harbor. I don't recall the exact date. It was sometime in like November, and that's shortly before the Chinese Communists intervened. I think they intervened on November 25th. In the meantime, we joined the destroyer Hank. Hank was the 701 and the cruiser St. Paul. We made a dash over to the western coast and up through Incheon again, where the original invasion was, and we went in fire support to the troops going ashore again for the second time. So sometime in, then we come back over on the eastern coast, and when the Chinese communists were pushing back, they pushed our troops out of there. We went into Hung Dam on Christmas, actually it was before Christmas, and we laid down a ring of fire, 5-inch 38 caliber shells. And I was in the blood room all this time, so I didn't hear too much. I've seen a lot, but I think that I'm getting most of the second half from after, because I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Christmas Eve, we were shelling and bringing troops out. Christmas Day, we were still bringing troops out and shelling. On Christmas, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we hightailed all the troops are out. We hightailed back to Sasebo, Japan. I spent some time in Sasebo and Yokosuka and Tokyo on the Liberty. And then we returned back to Korea again, and we spent the remainder of, until I think May 8th or something like that, we returned back to the States. Let's see, come back the same way we went from Midway to Pearl Harbor to San Diego, back to the Panama Canal, and up to Norfolk. Again, the ship went into dry dock for extensive overhaul and rearmament of different, getting rid of the 40mm anti-aircraft guns and putting 3-inch anti-aircraft guns in, and various other changes, better radar, etc. So that was probably sometime in, I came back from leave. I took a 30-day leave in July, I think, and I came back, and we had an entire new skipper, a new engineering officer, and I knew the handwriting was on the wall. I only had 6 months to do. My original enlistment was for 3 years. But when the Korean War broke out, they froze us all for a year. So I voluntarily extended my enlistment for 2 years with the understanding that if they didn't need me after 1 year, I would be discharged, which they honored. And I was discharged in January 1952. But when I came back to Norfolk, I found out that I was going to be transferred because I only had 6 months to do, and possibly another year. But the ship was leaving for, the Borie was leaving for another trip to the Med. So they transferred me to the Charleston Reserve Fleet, which I was assigned to the destroyer, the USS Wren, WREN, DD-568. And I was a second-class petty officer. I was assigned to the after fire room, which is the boiler room, number 2 boiler room. And I stood top watch. I was a second-class petty officer. I had 5 or 6 couple third-class petty officers and firemen under my jurisdiction, and we stood watch at 4 hours on and 8 hours off in the boiler room. And we cruised around the Norfolk area, in the Atlantic Ocean, went down to Cuba again, Guantanamo Bay. And when we came back, my time was up, they let me go. I was discharged probably December, sometime late in January of 1952. So I spent approximately 4 years in the United States Navy. I was discharged as a second-class petty officer, border technician.
Now, you referred to yourself as being an oil king on the ship.
Yes.
Could you be more specific as to what that meant?
Sure. As a border technician, they had aboard the destroyer, and most all big ships, they have tanks, oil tanks. It's actually bunker oil. It's probably the last part of any oil that's any useful to anything, and it stinks like hell. It burns. And it's useful in the boilers. And at flying speed, you'll burn like 3,000 gallons an hour in one boiler room. That's 6,000 gallons in both boiler rooms. At flying speed, I'm talking about 35, 36 knots, which is roughly 42 miles an hour. Anyway, what I did was kept records of how much oil was in various tanks. There was 15 tanks. 4 were service tanks that actually they drew from each boiler room, and they had to be switched from one tank to the next tank every 12 hours. And that way I kept inventory of how much oil was burned in that 12-hour period. In the meantime, what I did was I pumped oil from those storage tanks into the service tanks. And this is a full-time job. And that was other than general quarters, I didn't have to do anything else but pump oil, keep check of all the feed water aboard to make sure it was not salted up, the hardness. And I had various chemicals, test cabinets, so that I checked the water. And also the oil, we had to take soundings on the tanks with what they call a torpedo. You drop it down the sounding tube, and if there's any water, we would pick it up, and this is very bad for the boilers. They didn't like water coming out of the fuel oil. So that was basically what the oil king did. He was responsible for all the, and whenever we reported to the officers of the deck up on the bridge, gave him a report, and in turn he would contact the tankers, and they'd come alongside, and then I'd get all the firemen, and we'd go to various stations with sounding tubes they actually had rulers in them, and it collapsed and dropped them down, see how much oil was in the tank, and then as it filled up, we'd turn the valve off and sluice it into the next tank, and until the ship was full. So the ship held approximately 150,000 gallons of oil, and probably 10,000 of it you couldn't get at because it was below the suction lines, and you had to be careful when we get down that low.
What was your range on that?
Probably about 7,000 miles. We could make it from like Midway to Yokosuka, Japan, using one boiler at economic speed of like 14 knots. They didn't want to go any faster because they had one boiler on the line, and very low. It just kept the steam pressure up, which steam pressure was about 600 psi per square inch at like 750 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was high pressure boilers. All the machinery was on a high pressure. Of course, we had low pressure too to service the cafeteria or the mess hall, and heating was required.
Now, you said in this form that probably one of the greatest hardships was being at sea for 77 days. When was that?
That was the time when we left the Yokosuka, or when we reported to the Far East Command. 77 days was from October the 8th to Christmas Day. What I said, the main engines never stopped turning. We anchored out a couple of times in the Aiwan Harbor, which is near Wonsan Harbor in North Korea. But what they did, they dropped the anchor, turned the screws over to get the ship so it was pointing out to sea. That's in case we were attacked by aircraft or shore bombardment. We could sever the anchor out to sea. And the boilers were up to steam, or general quarters constantly, so the 77 days were really brutal.
Now, in the 1950s, the services were integrated. Did you have blacks in your unit?
Yes, we did. I had good third-class petty officer. His name was Benjamin Green. He was probably one of the first blacks that was, he come on board for, right after they integrated him, after he got off boot camp. He was assigned to my fireman.
Were there any problems at all? Or?
They were good people, most of them. I didn't have no difficulty.
How about being at sea for 77 days? Were there any problems within the crews at all? Or?
No, we got along pretty good, you know, bullshitting and having a good time. When we got ashore, that's, you know, there was a time when they, after that 77 day cruise, they gave us what they call a port and starboard liberty, and they took all of us up to some resort up in Tokyo area, up in the mountains. I don't know, not in Mount Fujiyama, but we did, I think we destroyed that hotel. We had a good time. Well, you know, after 77 days, the guys had to let it all hang out.
What kind of entertainment did you have on the ship? Did you have movies? And
We got movies, we got mostly all of it. Horseshit and gun smoke.
okay.
Any USO shows?
Pardon me?
Any USO shows or anything like that?
Not aboard our ship, no, it was too small. The big ships probably did, but we never got involved with it. Most of our entertainment came from going ashore. We got the liberty, but that wasn't very often.
Now, when you were offshore bombarding the coastline, were you ever under fire from
Yes.
shore batteries?
We took shore battery, and we never suffered a material or casualty, personal casualty. Probably some tanks challenged us at one time. I know they were throwing shells at us, but like I said, I was down below. And I was,
Yes, right.
Did your ship take some hits though?
No, we never sustained any material damage. Close, but nothing that would affect us. Our biggest concern was aircraft. We never knew if they were going to send aircraft in because we're sitting ducks. You know, you're not moving there really fast in an aircraft, and you know, especially the jets that can come in and they're gone before you can even turn your guns on them.
Now, after you left the service, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
Yes, I went to radio school and electronics actually is what I was interested in. And, that worked out good because later on in my career I became an electrician, millwright, pipe fitter, maintenance mechanic, and eventually I ended up retiring from the Lindy Company over here in one of the industrial companies over here as assistant superintendent of maintenance. So after 40 years, of course.
Did you ever use it to buy a home or anything?
Well, yeah, I bought my home that you had. I bought 2 homes.
Okay. Did you join any veterans organizations?
I belong to the Tonawanda Frontier Post.
Okay. How about, did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Lost contact with all of them. In fact, I just found out that there's, as you mentioned, Bob Clark, who was in service. I just found out his email address and I haven't heard from him. He was in board ship with me for quite a while. But most of the other people lost track of them all. Except aboard the Wren, I went onto the internet and I seen looking up the storage and stuff, and the Wren was in there, so I put my name down and I was served aboard it, and I got in contact with one of the guys who served under me, and he's writing he's the recording secretary and treasurer for what they call the bird. It's the bird is the Wren.
Yeah.
And he lives in Indiana, in Indianapolis, and they put a newspaper out quarterly with all the data from the guys who served on it, and that's probably the only guy I've stayed in contact with from my service. Except my 2 buddies that I enlisted with. I spent some time in boot camp with them, but I never seen them again until after well, one of the fellows stayed in for 25 years, and the other guy come out after 5. And the one fellow, Bob Wilson, he spent 25 years and then he became a lieutenant commander. And he served aboard the submarine that trained all submariners out of New London, Connecticut. He was lieutenant commander aboard this ship, and that's what he did for them.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
It helped train me good, a lot of discipline, a lot of taking orders, and not taking on how to do them, and that put me in my career with Lindy. So become a foreman.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Okay, thank you guys.